Thank you, Dean Lawrence. It's indeed an honor and privilege to be here and to share in introducing someone as distinguished as John McKellar. So come with me for a moment and imagine you are a young pastor really just sort of spreading your wings as a clergy in your conference. And a friend convinces you that you want to go talk to your district superintendent about a new appointment of some unusual promise, a dream appointment. In a moment of bad judgment, you take the friend's advice and you go talk to your district superintendent, who looks at you and says, "That's way too big a move for you." And so disappointed, you go home, only to get a call later that you're being sent to a little country church that they are considering closing. And as you get there, the floorboards are rotted and you have trouble actually standing straight in the sanctuary, right? Yeah. And one of the lay leaders looks at you and says, "Well, I don't know why they sent you here, but you better have your running shoes on because you're going to need to run." Now that's what happened to John McKellar and Debbie when they went to White's Chapel in 1992, at a time the church itself teetered on the brink of closure. And yet, since then, it has grown to be the second largest United Methodist Church in the nation in average worship attendance. And significantly, this exponential growth has not only demonstrated a deep sense of evangelism in leading people into a new and fresh relationship with Jesus Christ, but also exemplifies a high missional sense of ministry for those who are hungry and homeless and hurting. Under his leadership, White's Chapel is engaged in hands-on ministry with and partnered with the poorest of the poor in the Diamond Hill area of Fort Worth. Simultaneously, they've engaged in campus ministry at Texas Christian University, as Wesley Foundation, with University United Methodist Church of Fort Worth. And while those ministry partnerships have been concluded, they've continued to reach out in highly creative ways, including, but not limited to Zay Young Adult Leadership Gathering, Assistance for El Buen Samaritano, Angels Addict, and the list could go on and on. While serving with integrity and exemplary grace, Dr. McKellar is also engaged actively in work in the Central Texas Conference. Under his leadership, they've hosted the annual conference twice, and he's currently finishing an 8-year term as chair of the Council on Finance and Administration. In that time, he's instituted a new budgeting process, played a significant role in redirecting money to outreach missionally for the poor and evangelistic emphasis in reaching those who don't know Christ. In addition, has served as one of the model mentors for Path One, the new church development emphasis of new places for new people in the United Methodist Church, so much so that officials of the Board of Discipleship Ministries call John, quote, the ideal mentor pastor. Now, I can think of no higher or more distinguished alumnus than John McKellar to be recognized for his faithfulness and fruitfulness of work at every level in the life of the church, including General Conference. It not only shouts excellence, but it lives and breathes a compassionate outreach that has the ability to span the wide breadth of not just theological, but ideological conviction, economic status, and ethnic origin. In fact, John has done this with such a profound sense of being able to reach across diverse and often disagreeing groups that we can only conclude, friends, this is a man who walks with Christ. Dean Lawrence, should you manage to find a better candidate for the Distinguished Alumni Award, please notify me first among my fellow bishops. And secondly, send the person over so that I can have some water changed to wine.
Well, gosh, John, I didn't know you were that good. Many of my best moments and all but a few of my best memories happen with John in some way. I guess that's what happens whenever you spend over a third of your life with someone. But one of my favorite moments occurred my first Christmas Eve at White's Chapel. It was 2003. It was the last Christmas Eve service of the day after preaching 9, I guess, at that point. At that time, I didn't realize how exhausted and how slap happy you get after preaching going into your 10th service of the day. But always with grace, always with class, and an incredibly powerful service. And at the very end of the Christmas Eve service, it was midnight outside. It was officially Christmas morning. John went over to the Christ candle. It was time to light everyone's candles out in the congregation. But at that time, we had some horrible sightline issues in our sanctuary, and John preached from these boxes that were 2.5 feet high, and there was a little baby box behind all of these boxes to use as a step that you could get on to the big box to preach your message. Well, somewhere in the 9 hours of preaching, John had forgot the baby box step in the back. And so there he was explaining the power and the significance of the Christ candle, how that one flame would spread the light through the entire room. And he offered it to all of us, all of the associate pastors. We took ours and went down to our specified sections of the sanctuary to light the congregation's candles. And I turned around after I heard a loud thud, just in time to see John go, whap, and bite it. Flat on his face. Candle drops. He trips, and then he gets right back up. He jumps up to pass the light of Christ. And that's John. Not everything that we have tried has worked, but he leads us to get right back up. He inspires all of us, his pastoral team, his staff, his congregation to do just that, to get back up and to share the light. To dare greatly for God, to risk it all for the sake of the kingdom, and if we fail, or when we fail, to get back up a little wiser, a little more broken, but perhaps a little more useful in the hands of the Almighty. And as someone who needed that sort of healing myself, as a guy who had some scars from my own personal church life, what I found in John was a grace that I had never known. A brother, a father in faith and one in ministry, one who had great success while never forgetting his roots. One who led, as Bishop Lowry said, a church from the brink of closure to believe in itself again, and who's led hundreds of her people, including me, to take the same journey. Because behind every number, there's a name, and behind all of those statistics, there are stories of folks who know God more intimately because of the authentic example and the humble invitation of this sincere faller-downer and getter-back-upper. And so it is an incredible honor to get to recognize and to introduce my mentor, my friend, my hero, John McKellar.
Thank you. My friends and colleagues that know me know that I am a crier. And Todd said he was going to do this to me. And Bishop, thank you so very much. I am just overwhelmed and so honored. It's really lucky in that dark period for me in 2003. I think God answered some of my prayers by sending Todd my way. And it's awesome to get to work with a co-pastor, with someone who compliments you so well. Todd is head and I am heart. He is organized and I am chaos in motion. And together we bring out the best in each other and challenge each other and grow each other. And Bishop Lowry, thank you so much. He is such a magnificent leader and a great teacher. And we have partnered together on so many things. And I am honored to get to be his offensive lineman. And he is the star quarterback of the team. So thank you, Bishop. We teach a preaching school. And we just spent 4 days together last week working with young clergy, and what a great teacher. His last lecture is just a classic. And I get fired up for ministry, and I'm ready to go again. And so, Bishop, thank you for your great leadership. And I'm just hugely aware that an award like this goes to many people. It goes to family and friends and church members, and I went as a second career. I was a CPA before I went to Perkins, and our family moved together to Haslett, Texas, and my wife, Debbie, and our children, Jay and Chandler. What a blessing. Every step of the way, we have been there together. And I'll never forget when I was in Haslett. Now, at the time, now Alliance Airport is out there and it is developed. I thought I was in the far reaches of West Texas. In fact, I really thought, and I was a Louisiana boy, that I was in a suburb of El Paso and that there was no such barren place as this was. And so I asked them, because I had a class in the summer, and I said, how do you get to SMU from here? And they said, well, there's no good way to get there from here. But what is amazing to me is the route I took was down Highway 114, that's very different today, through a little town called Southlake that looked like a big pasture area, and at the end was a little Dairy Queen. And I thought, what's up with this Southlake, never knowing that my life's work would be lived in that place. So I was at Perkins from 1986 to 1990, and I was just thinking about some of the professors that shaped me, just to mention that I have lived out in my ministry. Number one for me, and just the huge role model that I think of all the time, was Dick Murray. I took every class he offered. One of the things he said is, pastor, teach the Bible to your people. And the hallmark of my ministry is I teach 3 and 4 Bible studies every week. And the connections we have had by learning Scripture together, I think, is one of the keys to our church's success. So I always remember Dick Murray. I remember Billy Abraham. Had him for doctrine and evangelism, and just inspired me to be passionate about sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. I remember Dr. Joseph Allen. Took him for moral theology, also a class on ethics and the problem of war. And just war theory stuck with me, and I remembered that through the years. Dr. William Farmer, I had him for Matthew, and a great love of the Gospel of Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount. Marjorie Proctor Smith taught me a great love of the liturgical year. And then one of the great delights that I had was Bishop James Thomas. When he left being bishop, came to do some research, and he was the resident bishop at Perkins in those years, and I had him for polity. And then there was a post-intern class that used to be required, but they made it an elective, and most everybody dropped. But it was a time I needed to be there, so there were 5 of us that showed up with Bishop Thomas. Was the most amazing experience of my life. It was like young Jedi with Yoda, learning wisdom about pastoral ministry, and I will treasure that. I'm one of those really blessed people. I did my internship with Bishop Mike McKee when Mike was at Meadowbrook, and I learned from Bishop McKee about leadership, and we still run administrative committees in every church I pastored the way Mike taught me, and the passion for worship and the local church I learned from Bishop McKee. Mike, thank you so much for your leadership. And at Perkins, I was one of those group of student local pastors. And we were a group, to be honest with you, that were serving churches in all kind of places, rural appointments. We were associate pastors, any city. And one of the luckiest moments of my life actually happened first day of class. I was sitting in the auditorium near the back, and I happened to be sitting in front of this young guy right out of college. I was 29, he was 22, that made me laugh. And I turned around and met John Robbins for the first time. And he made me laugh for 2 years. And then I'll never forget, we began our internship year, and we were in a pastoral care office with our growth group beginning, and he announced the news that his mother was very ill. And I remember after that meeting, we went to lunch. And we have been the closest of friends since that time. And John and I have moved each other and worked with each other. And I really always think about those student local pastor days, because it's those student local pastors are not the best students, because they're juggling church and they're juggling family and they're trying to make it work economically. And yet what we learned was balanced by the local church. And in that whole group, there was a deep, passionate love of the church that never left us, and a love of people. And I think it is the greatest preparation for ministry. So at Weiss Chapel, through the years, we have constantly had a lot of student local pastors on our staff. And I love to tease them. I tell them, if you make an A, you're cheating the church. We're only paying you for a B. Now, Dean, I was teasing someone. I've also been privileged to pastor great churches, but I could not be here today without thanking I think, one of the great churches of Methodism, and that's Weiss Chapel United Methodist Church. This honor is really their honor. This congregation has allowed me to build and dream and fail. They've been open to experiment and push the envelope. They've allowed us to follow the Holy Spirit when it seemed to make no sense. And not only the members who are here, but the staff who are my family. I would just like for them to stand, because this is really their award. All the Weiss Chapel folk that are here and Weiss Chapel staff, if you'd stand. Thank you. You know, we live in a challenging time for the church, and we know that. The end of an era that began following World War II, and we have seen it coming. It is coming to an end, and we prophesied about this change when I was in seminary in the 1980s, but unfortunately, we in leadership in the church have been trapped by our success and unable to change. The future we're moving into is going to require a new kind of partnering, different than we've ever done, between seminaries and annual conferences and local congregations. There's some things we must do. We've got to simplify and streamline our ordination process. We've got to see theological training as a lifetime pursuit with new ways of doing continuing education. And we have to empower bishops to set higher standards of accountability. These things are must. Here's what we know. We could try to maintain the status quo, and the change that is coming will overwhelm us, or we can start working and dreaming and adjusting and partnering in new ways and try to lead the change that is inevitable. The hour is late, but it's not too late. And I think to do that, we have to go back to where I began. And that is, we have to go back to Haslett, Texas, that little country sanctuary that's actually closed now. It's now a non-denominational church. But that sanctuary, I can go back there in my mind. I can smell that old, musty church smell. And the red carpet in the pastor's study was a little broom closet with a desk and a filing cabinet. There was no room for a chair. So I'm used to office hours, always have done that. So there was no room in the office. So I would go in the sanctuary. And Mondays, we didn't have class. So those would be my office hours on Monday. And I'd be thinking about school and the lessons we were studying. And I would plan worship and think about sermons. And I would dream about the church and things I hoped God would do in the future. I'm also an intensely shy extrovert, which means I love to talk with someone. I do not like to be alone. I think by talking. Poor Todd has heard every thought I've ever had in 12 years, the last 12 years. But I do that, and so I was all alone, no friends, didn't know anybody to talk to. And so I had staff meetings with Jesus. Now, Bishop McKee, I might not would have passed my psych test if I told you that in the ordination process, but literally, Jesus and I would have staff meetings, and in that time, I am convinced I dreamed of the church that Weiss Chapel would be. And we're going to have to go back to that place where we listen to the Spirit and imagine the church that Christ wants us to build in this time and day. We sang it in the old hymn yesterday, and I just can't let it go. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I proved Him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus. Oh, for grace to trust Him more. Thank you, and God bless you.